I don't really actually think the question is whether or not the tears were legitimate or not. The question is whether or not they matter. There are 2 lives that were lost and another person that was injured. There was an entire community that was terrorized. So whether or not the person who pulled that trigger had tears to show afterwards, really, for me, frankly, is not the point. And it shouldn't be the focus of the conversation, because ultimately we are at a place where figuring out whether or not somebody is crying legitimately or not is distracting us from the kind of terror that we're experiencing all across this country. I do believe that the act of picking up an AR-15, getting a ride to Kenosha, and standing out there to supposedly defend property is all about terrorizing people into operating in a certain social order. And the conclusions that we got from this particular verdict, the actions of this judge, the actions of Kyle Rittenhouse, and to be clear, the aggregate kind of understanding that we get from these Zimmerman-style verdicts, that aggregate message is twofold. One, it is to tell the current and future Kyle Rittenhouses of the world that they can engage in white vigilantism and be let off for it, be defended and protected for perpetuating white supremacy. And 2, that the rest of us, of any background, of any color, who want to stand in the way of that white supremacy are at risk, and we should be warned. That is the only message that I'm getting, tears or not.
And you make the point, and I know you've made it, Brittany, that the only reason why Kyle Rittenhouse, the only reason why these racial demonstration protests, these racial justice protests were happening in the first place was because, of course, of what happened to Jacob Blake.
That's right. I mean, I hear the defenders of Kyle Rittenhouse speaking all the time about this idea of self-defense. But Kyle Rittenhouse's entitlement to pick up that AR-15 would not have been triggered had the police not once again wantonly shown disregard for Black life. The only reason why these protests were happening, the only reason why Kyle Rittenhouse got in that car was because Jacob Blake was shot in a long run of a series of Americans, and in particular Americans of color and Black Americans, who continue to be disrespected and shot and sometimes killed by law enforcement. So we want to keep talking about the symptoms instead of talking about the cause, because talking about the cause would, of course, put an entire culture of white supremacy that white privilege is derived from on trial. And frankly, that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. So they'd much rather stand up for Kyle Rittenhouse than stand against the things that keep them comfortable.